Revenge with Karen began quietly, not with anger, but with absence. The moment I realized it was over came, not with a meeting, but with a sterile email and a sentence so cold it felt machine-made. The CFO called it a small blip like a printer jam no one cared about. 30 years of work reduced to a footnote, erased without a call, without even the courtesy of a human tone. I sat in my kitchen robe, still warm from the dryer, staring at the message. The words didn't change, no matter how long I looked. And that was when I understood they had already moved on. They had buried me without ceremony, wrapped my legacy in budget cuts, and filed it away. The company I built no longer remembered the hands that held it together. I wasn't loud about it. I didn't throw anything or make a scene. I simply stood up, opened the forgotten cabinet above the fridge, and reached for something older than their arrogance. The binder was thick, dusty, and heavy with time. Inside it lived the early bones of the company. Documents written when everything still mattered and nothing was disposable. I flipped through pages slowly, each one a reminder of nights, spent building something from nothing. Then I found a clause buried deep, waiting patiently like a trap set decades ago. Close one for D wasn't flashy or complicated. It was simple, precise, and devastatingly clear. A line that turned negligence into consequence. Any material damage to compensation would trigger a payout. Not symbolic, not negotiable, but immediate and absolute. I traced my signature beneath it. The ink slightly faded, but still undeniable. Back then, it had felt unnecessary, almost dramatic. But now it felt inevitable. The company had grown bigger, louder, and far more careless. They had forgotten to read the foundations they were standing on. I closed the binder without emotion. Revenge wasn't the goal. This wasn't about anger. It was about alignment, about restoring balance to something broken. The email I sent was short and precise. No threats, no emotion, just a subject line that carried weight far beyond its words. Close one for deactivated. That was all they needed to know and more than they were prepared to handle. I didn't wait for a reply. Didn't sit around expecting panic. Instead, I went back to my day watering plants, answering emails, living as if nothing had shifted. But something had shifted quietly and permanently. The foundation had cracked, and the tremor was already spreading through their polished offices. My lawyer confirmed what I already knew. The clause was active, untouched, and legally intact. A sleeping giant they had just awakened. I didn't rush, didn't escalate, didn't push. I let them move first because people always reveal themselves when they think they're in control. The denial came quickly, arrogant and dismissive. They claimed it was outdated, irrelevant, overridden by newer agreements I had never signed. That was their mistake, assuming silence meant compliance. I had kept every record, every email, every refusal carefully documented. Their legal team began to dig slowly at first, then with urgency. Each file they uncovered only confirmed what they feared, that the clause still stood. The tension wasn't loud. It didn't explode into chaos. It crept in quietly, visible, only in subtle shifts, delayed meetings, hushed conversations, nervous glances. I watched it all without reacting. Observation had always been my strength, understanding people before they understood themselves. They thought they could outweight me, stall me into exhaustion. They underestimated what 30 years of patience had built inside me. The silence stretched, days passing without resolution. But silence isn't empty. It's pressure building, tightening, preparing to break. Then the first crack appeared. A junior associate confirmed what leadership was trying to deny, that the close was valid, enforceable, and dangerous. That single acknowledgement changed everything. What had been dismissed as trivial was now a confirmed liability. The company shifted into quiet panic. Systems were accessed. Old files reopened. Decisions revisited with urgency that bordered on desperation. I continued as usual, attending meetings, reviewing documents, blending into the background. They still didn't see me clearly, and that worked in my favor. Fear began to replace arrogance. It showed in delayed responses, in cautious language, in the sudden absence of confidence. Then came the mistake that ended everything. An internal message leaked, careless and cruel, revealing exactly what they thought of me. They believed I was too old to fight, too tired, too irrelevant, too easy to outlast. That assumption sealed their fate. Not because it offended me, but because it proved intent. I documented everything carefully. Evidence isn't about emotion. It's about clarity, about showing truth in a way no one can deny. My response to the board was calm, structured, and final. I didn't argue, didn't plead. I simply presented facts and consequences. From that moment, it was no longer a dispute. It was enforcement. Legal escalated. External counsel stepped in, and the company began to unravel under its own miscalculations. Every delay only made the outcome worse. The deadline came and went. They missed it. Whether through denial or incompetence didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the clause's next stage. Interest escalation and automatic consequences triggered without hesitation. The system did the work for me. Contracts don't care about emotions. They execute exactly as written. Panic spread through leadership. Resignations followed. Quiet exits disguised as personal decisions. The financial impact was immediate. Credit lines froze. Partners hesitated. Trust began to erode faster than they could repair it. Media picked up the story, turning internal failure into public scrutiny. But I didn't speak, didn't explain, didn't justify. The truth didn't need amplification and stood on its own. Layoffs followed. Collateral damage from decisions made far above. That part wasn't satisfying. It never is. This was never about destruction. It was about consequence. When the payment finally arrived, it wasn't dramatic. Just numbers on a screen, quiet and definitive. The amount reflected more than money. It reflected acknowledgement whether they admitted it or not. The new CFO sent an apology. Polite, careful, and too late to matter. I didn't respond. Some conversations and without words. I left quietly without announcement or ceremony. There was nothing left to prove, nothing left to claim. The cabin by the lake had been waiting for years, a place untouched by corporate noise, where silence meant peace, not neglect. I sat outside with a notebook reflecting not on victory, but on lessons. Patterns repeated over time, mistakes disguised as strategy. On the final page, I wrote one line. Not for them, but for myself. They forgot who built the foundation. That was enough. I closed the notebook and watched the water move. Still, steady, unaffected by everything that had happened. In the end, I didn't destroy anything. I simply let the structure collapse under its own weight. And that's the part they'll never forget. Not the payout, not the headlines, but the quiet certainty that I was always there holding everything together until I chose not.